This is the Sony RX10 Mark IV, and after 9 long years, Sony has finally unveiled the Mark V. So in today's video, we're going to talk about what's changed, but also what stayed the same. So one of the primary differences from the Mark IV to Mark V is going to be the battery. So the old Mark IV used this battery right here, which was the Sony W battery. And for the time it served its purpose, but right now it's considered weak and relatively underpowered. So now the Mark V has the more modern Sony Z variant of this battery, which actually does a great job of taking a lot of shots, getting a lot of video, and giving us that extra juice for those long shoots. So the biggest improvement that the Mark IV made over the Mark III was realistically just switching to the phase detect autofocus. That right there made a huge difference from the previous contrast-based Mark III. So let me give you some history back here. When the Sony RX10 Mark III came out, I bought it in the Sony store in Singapore a long time ago, and I took it all over the world. I used it, I loved it, it worked great. The only problem that I had though was that the autofocus was a little bit tough to get it right in challenging conditions, and that was because it was contract to test autofocus, unfortunately. When the Mark IV came out, it brought it up to the standards of Sony cameras at that time. So we did get phase detect autofocus, and it was a lot better than what the Mark III had to offer. So now with the jump from the Mark IV to the Mark V, we're going from the previous gen up into the new AI gen of autofocus cameras. So if it's something like my A6700, it is going to be nice and snappy, and we really should be happy with having this type of camera, but having the newest, quickest autofocus. Another change between cameras was the body design itself. This camera right here was kind of based off an old legacy design of what bridge cameras were supposed to be back in the day. The new Mark V has kind of changed it up to make it more in line with alpha mirrorless cameras. The unfortunate part about it though is that we did lose a couple of features that were on this design, and it is no longer on the Mark V. And I'm going to show you right now what these features are. The first major change was the removal of this handy top screen, which allowed you to change the exposure details with the more tactile feel. And one of the other omissions was this handy dandy pop-up flash, which wasn't entirely useful, but it did help out to give you some fill flash in situations in which you might not have been able to otherwise. So as a matter of fact, just to kind of show you what this feature can do, I'm going to have my wife take a quick photo of me without the flash and then with the flash in this challenging condition right here. So as we just saw by reviewing those few photos that we took of myself, you can really see that that fill flash does add a little bit of extra flair and makes a more usable photo straight out of the camera, which is unfortunate that the Mark V does not have this because these are supposed to be all-in-one cameras. Now on a side note, the Mark IV has 24 frames per second shooting with that autofocus, so we're able to get some good shots. Now the Mark V brings it up to the current Sony standard 30 frames per second shooting with the AI autofocus, so I can't really imagine what that combination would be like. So that part I am excited about. One of the other things to note is that we're not getting much of a resolution bump in the difference between the 4 and the 5. We're still using the same 20.1 megapixel 1-inch sensor that was in the 4 that is currently going into the 5. There may be some sort of computational process in there that may be giving you better image quality, but as far as I'm aware, there's not going to be that, wow, these images are much better coming out of the 5 than the 4. As a matter of fact, when I took this out to the Philippines, I shot with the RX10 Mark IV exclusively, and I brought this one photo that I like to hold up. We went and blew it up, and it looks great. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and put this up on the screen right now so you can take a look at it. And then also of note, we are getting the standard on these cameras these days, USB-C charging, which is really nice. And there's apparently also seems to be a micro USB port too as well, which is an old legacy standard. So it's a little bit interesting. But the differences between the Mark IV and the Mark V, they're just basically, you're getting the same kind of images, the same kind of resolution, that type of thing, but it's just bringing it more in line with Sony's modern cameras. So now that we talked about some of the differences, let's go ahead and go over some of the things that are about the same. So one of the major disappointments of the new design is it still uses this same old screen. right there. So you don't really have the range and capability that you had in any of the newer cameras, including the A6700 or like even the even better A7 R5 and 6. So with this screen, you're realistically just getting up a little bit higher, going a little bit lower, or you're just using it as you would like a cell phone. So there's not much room for getting creative shots with this kind of pull-out screen as there are in the newer Sony cameras. So another thing that has about stayed the same on this camera is going to be the lens right here. So this is a Zeiss 8.8 to 220, aka 35mm equivalent 24 to 600 lens. Now there were a lot of people that were hoping for a 10 to 2000 lens, but of course that's not going to happen because that lens would be about the size of a Canon realistically. So we are still stuck, quote unquote, with the same lens from the Mark IV up into the Mark V. The thing is though that this lens is really good. It does the job. You still get a 24mm field of view equipment all the way up to 600, which is done really well. I've shot concerts in the past with this. We've gone to several like George Strait concerts, things of that nature. And what I can tell you is that with this camera getting into those concert venues, it's been great. And I've been able to get far sharper, far more clear video, far more clear photos than basically anyone else around the venue that wasn't there specifically to be paid to photograph that concert. So one thing I gotta say is that even though that this lens is gonna be the same out here, this is still a great lens. Matter of fact, right now, I'm gonna go ahead and show you the zoom length that we get on this lens. We're gonna pop up some of the 4K video on the RX10 Mark IV, and you're gonna see just what you're gonna be getting with the 5 as well. So as you can see, this is a seriously impressive zoom range from this little camera right here. And that's going to be the same with the Mark V. So after all this being said about these two cameras, what are we left with? And what we're left with is the price. $2,400 USD for the RX10 Mark V, $1,700 at release for the RX10 Mark IV. Now, are these two cameras that much different to warrant that much of a price difference? And I gotta say, I'm not so sure, because at its core, the RX10 Mark V is a very, very similar camera to the Mark IV. The only really true differences that Sony has made is just kind of brought it to the current new generation kind of technical specs of what Sony cameras are right now. And by in and of itself, that is a pretty good improvement, but I'm not sure if it's an improvement that's gonna cost you $2,400. Now, if you ask me, am I gonna buy the Mark V when it comes out? And to me, that's a definite, I'm not sure, because the Mark IV still fits my needs. But there may be a time in the future when that Mark V does fit my workflow better than the Mark IV does. Until then though, we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see when this model comes out, and we're gonna see exactly what the true differences are once it's in a lot of people's hands and they can kind of see what's going on for themselves. So until then, this is Sean from Southwestern Studios, and I will see you guys on the next video.